and we'll start off here and then we'll go to some other places. But this is an account where the Lord had Israel to make a couple of trumpets, silver trumpets. So it says in verse 1, "And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Make thee 2 trumpets of silver, of a whole piece shalt thou make them, that thou mayest use them for the calling of the assembly and for the journeying of the camps. And when they blow with them, all the assembly shall assemble themselves to thee at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And if they blow but with one trumpet, then the princes, which are heads of the thousands of Israel, shall gather themselves unto thee. And when you blow an alarm, then the camps that lie on the east parts shall go forward. And when you blow an alarm the second time, then the camps that lie on the south side shall take their journey. They shall blow an alarm for their journeys. But when the congregation is to be gathered together, ye shall blow, but ye shall not sound an alarm. And the sons of Aaron the priest shall blow with the trumpets, and they shall be to you for an ordinance forever throughout your generations. And if you go to war in your land against the enemy that oppresseth you, then ye shall blow an alarm with the trumpets, and ye shall be remembered before the Lord your God, and ye shall be saved from your enemies. Also in the day of your gladness, and in your solemn days, and in the beginnings of your months, ye shall blow with the trumpets over your burnt offerings, and over the sacrifices of your peace offerings, that they may be to you for a memorial before your God. I am the Lord your God." All right, so this is where we find Israel at actually in this passage is very similar to our study in Numbers 13 and 14. You remember at Kadesh Barnea? And so we actually came back to chapter 10, I believe it was, in our last lesson, and we noticed that they left Mount Sinai here, and you'll notice in verses 11 and 12, and we'll read those later, they left Mount Sinai, went straight to the area of Paran, which was Kadesh Barnea, where they sent the 12 spies in, and then ended up, rejecting the idea of going forward. And of course, God judged them there. So it's one of the last things that happens before they pick up camp, and they've been there about a year. They took some time to build the tabernacle. They had all of that pieced together. They had erected, because we'll notice that in a moment. They had to tear it down. And so the tabernacle was up and functioning and running. So there's so many, details that take place in Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, all of these establishing of these different ordinances, or like making of trumpets. These things are listed here. So we want to look again at verse 2. It says, "Make thee 2 trumpets of silver." All right, so these are distinctly different from the ram's horn shofar, which is another instrument used as a trumpet. We'll notice in a little bit as well. But see, these are made out of a single piece. Notice in verse 2, of a whole piece shalt thou make them. So one piece of silver made one trumpet. So they evidently, took a person who knew what they were doing, a metallurgist, or someone who was, good with working metal into fabrication, had to do this. And so I'm going to assume, and different writers will say this about concerning this. Obviously this is not going to be a trumpet like in our day where they had, the different knobs to push, and it's probably just one long tube with a horn at the end. And so you'd see that maybe in some old English pictures or movies, with men standing at a gate and just blowing a straight trumpet. And so that's probably what they look like. Now, God states the purpose for them in verse 2 as well, and it says they were for the calling of the assembly and for the journeying of the camps. So want to just begin to think about this in the sense that Israel now is a nation of a lot of people. They came out of Canaan, went into Egypt as 70 souls, about 70 souls, the Bible says, with Jacob and his 12 sons. Spent 400 years in there, ended up in bondage, come out. We don't know the amount. The Bible doesn't say. It's estimated 1-2 million people. So with that in mind, think about. You ever been somewhere where there was 1 million people in one place? If you've been to a ball game at a large stadium, there may be, 50,000, Amber, at maybe the biggest ones, around 50,000, some of these places. That's a lot of people. Well, that's 20 times that amount of people in one. That's just for 1 million. So if we have 2 million, so we can see the need, right, for a trumpet, for a signal, for instead of someone walking around and yelling, saying, gather here, and sending out the runners, I guess you would call them. They could stand at the congregation, the door of the congregation of the tabernacle. They could stand there, blow the trumpet, and the whole congregation would hear. So it has a purpose. Calling the assembly, journeying the camps. The calling, it means a public meeting or an assembly. So that's in verse 2, it says the calling of the assembly. The word calling means a public meeting. And so it gets more specific here as it goes along. Verse 3, they shall blow with them, and all the assembly shall assemble themselves to thee at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. Now, this is significant in the sense that, before they got to Mount Sinai, they didn't have this. They didn't have the tabernacle. They didn't know what one was, because God gave it to Moses on Mount Sinai when he gave them the 10 Commandments, and he gave them all the details. This is how you make it. This is the colors. This is the length and breadth and all this. And they fabricated it and they set it up, and it was a mobile structure. They could build it, and they could take it down, and they could carry it to the next place, to the next camp. Okay, so all of that was done. And so the tabernacle was the center of, when they camped in Israel, they camped around the tabernacle, and that was the focal point of the camp. Now, we notice the trumpets here in verse number 3 were put in use after the tabernacle was made, and so verse 11 kind of gives the timeline. We'll jump forward there. It came to pass on the 20th day of the second month in the second year. So they'd been away from Egypt into the second year now, not 2 full years, but in the second year, that the cloud was taken up from off the tabernacle, see, there it is, of the testimony. And the children of Israel took their journeys out of the wilderness of Sinai, and the cloud rested in the wilderness of Paran. Now, we know what that means because we just studied that in Numbers 13 and 14, that Paran was where Kadesh Barnea was and where they sent the 12 spies into the land. So we see this is where we're at, with it's right on the end of the Mount Sinai experience. Now, verse 4 says, if they blow but with one trumpet, then the princes which are heads of the thousands of Israel shall gather themselves together. All right, so there was some specifics here about one trumpet meant just the princes, 2 trumpets meant everybody was together. And then there's verse 5, when you blow an alarm, then the camps that lie on the east part shall go forward. And when you blow an alarm the second time, then the camps lie on the south side shall take their journey. And they shall blow an alarm for their journey. So you kind of wonder, why did they just mention the east side and the south side here? But it seems like the idea is that when they broke encampment to go to another place, the east side would be the ones that would go first. And I guess to create lack of confusion and everybody doing everything at once, the east side, which if you'll study the other scriptures, that was Judah's tribe. In fact, it's listed later on here in these verses, in verse number, in fact, you can go over to verse 14. It says, in the first place went the standard of the camp of the children of Judah, according to their armies, and over his host was Nahshon, the son of Abinadab. All right, so each, they begin to list, so each tribe would pick up, and then after that tribe, the next tribe would go, and so it was a very orderly process that God had set up here. Now, an alarm sound, you'll notice in verse 6 or 5 and 6, it says, when you blow an alarm sound, this was different from like just a gathering together sound or a journeying sound. An alarm was a continuous peal of short, sharp blast, distinct from an ordinary assembly call. Now, I know this is just kind of history and specifics, but we'll dig into some of the applications of it as we go along here. In verse 8, we'll notice the sons of Aaron the priest shall blow with the trumpets, and they shall be to you for an ordinance forever throughout your generations. All right, so this was a job for the priests, or the sons of the priests, which was Aaron's sons at this time. They were the ones authorized to do this. And then in verse 9 and 10, it kind of gets a little more interesting here. If you go to war in your land against the enemy that oppresseth you, notice this, then ye shall blow an alarm with the trumpets, and ye shall be remembered before the Lord your God, and ye shall be saved from your enemies. Now, it's just, I didn't really study the depth of this verse to see if there was some more meaning to this than just what it says. But the idea is given in this verse that if they blow the alarm, it's like it gets God's attention too. Now, we know God doesn't need his attention gotten because he sees all, hears all. But at the same time, there's a promise attached with it. You shall blow an alarm with the trumpets, and ye shall be remembered before the Lord your God, and ye shall be saved from your enemies. Okay, so there's a blanket promise, blessing of promise here. And I like that. I mean, it's like if you do this, in other words, you're getting ready to go to war, your enemies are camped around you, or you're going to go to battle, blow the trumpet, and the Lord will remember you, and you'll have victory. I mean, what a blessing, right? I mean, to wake up every day and to think, I got victory today. Tomorrow, I'm going to have victory today. The next day, I got victory today. I mean, think about it. Really and truly, as God's people, we're promised that anyway. We've got victory if we do things according to the way the Lord wants us to. I like that. Now, verse 10 says, also in the day of your gladness and in your solemn days. So these are feast days in the beginnings of your months. You blow the trumpets over your burnt offerings, your sacrifices, and peace offerings, that they may be to you for memorial before your God. I am the Lord your God. So trumpets being used here in lots of different ways. In summary, we see one use would be the gathering of the people. Secondly, directing the march or breaking camp. Thirdly, going to war. And fourthly, for worships and feasts. All right. Now I want you to go to Exodus 19. And I want to notice something here regarding a trumpet that no man blew, but it got blown. In Exodus 19, when they came to the Mount Sinai area and were going to be given the Ten Commandments or the law of God, the covenant of God. And so this is an interesting section because in Exodus 19, verse 10, we'll notice that the trumpets are mentioned here. And it says, and the Lord said unto Moses, go unto the people and sanctify them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their clothes and be ready against the third day. For the third day the Lord will come down in the sight of all the people upon Mount Sinai. Now, let's think about this for a moment. We know the presence of the Lord was with them in the pillory cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. That was the presence of the Lord. But this is a different sort of a thing. This is a different sort of a presence of God that is descending upon Mount Sinai. And we'll notice is different because notice what happens. It says in verse number 12, and thou shalt set bounds unto the people round about, saying, take heed to yourselves, that ye go not up into the mount or touch the border of it. Whosoever toucheth the mount shall be surely put to death. There shall not an hand touch it, but he shall surely be stoned or shot through, whether it be man or beast, beast or man, it shall not live. When the trumpet soundeth long, they shall come up to the mount. So notice God says, a trumpet's going to sound. That's when you want to come up to the mount. And Moses went down from the mount unto the people and sanctified the people, and they washed their clothes. And he said unto the people, be ready against the third day, come not at your wives. And it came to pass on the third day in the morning that there were thunders and lightnings and a thick cloud upon the mount, and the voice of the trumpet exceeding loud, so that all the people that was in the camp trembled. And Moses brought forth the people out of the camp to meet with God, and they stood at the nether part of the mount, and Mount Sinai was altogether on a smoke, because the Lord descended upon it in fire, and the smoke thereof ascended as the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mount quaked greatly. And when the voice of the trumpet sounded long and waxed louder and louder, Moses spake, and God answered him by a voice. So I want us to kind of get the picture here in thinking about this. I wish I could be a fly on the wall, or just have a recreation of this somehow that's fairly accurate. Because again, thinking about 1 million or 2 million people, because God told Moses for the people to come out of the camp and stand by Mount Sinai. So you have, what you've got is, it's a solemn assembly. The Old Testament talks about these solemn assemblies. And this was a solemn assembly of the whole congregation of Israel coming up to the mount, because God wanted them to see this. He wanted them to witness this. Now, if you fast forward 1 year, when they leave Mount Sinai and go to Paran, and they end up at Kadesh Barnea, and they say, we're not going in, we want to go back to Egypt, after they just witnessed this. I mean, think about the lack of faith these people really had. It's astounding. They saw Mount Sinai all on a smoke, thick cloud descended, thunders and lightnings, and this trumpet that they heard. I mean, listen, it wasn't just 2 or 3 people that heard this sound. They all heard it. I mean, this was a witness that they had there was no discrepancy here. They all heard the same thing. They all saw the same thing. The Lord descended on a smoke and upon a fire. And the whole mount quaked greatly. I mean, people were afraid because of what they saw. The power of God on display in nature like they'd never seen before. But what sticks out in our study as we're looking at this is this trumpet that sounded, and it sounded long, and it got louder and louder, and I imagine to the point that people were plugging their ears. Now go to Joshua chapter 6. And let's look at something else. Now this is a different kind of a trumpet. This is what we would call the shofar, but it has a trumpet sound. So Joshua 6 and verse number 4. I want you to notice in this account the priests are going to blow the trumpets or the shofars as they march around Jericho. Now in verse number 4 of Joshua 6, and the 7 priests shall bear before the ark 7 trumpets of ram's horns. And the 7th day ye shall compass the city 7 times. And the priests shall blow with the trumpets. And it shall come to pass when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet, all the people shall shout with a great shout. And the wall of the city shall fall down flat, and the people shall ascend up every man straight before him. And Joshua the son of Nun called the priests and said unto them, take up the ark of the covenant, and let 7 priests bear 7 trumpets of the ram's horns before the ark of the Lord. So let's stop there. So this is the procession. They were going to march around the city of Jericho, the whole army. The 7 priests would go first, and they all were bearing a shofar, trumpet. And then the ark of the covenant was behind them, and then the army was marching behind this procession of the 7 priests with the trumpets, and then the ark of the covenant. And the men were not to say a word when they did this. Now notice in verse number 7, pass on and compass the city, and let him that is armed pass on before the ark of the Lord. And it came to pass when Joshua had spoken unto the people, that the 7 priests bearing the 7 trumpets of ram's horns passed on before the Lord, and blew with the trumpets, and the ark of the covenant of the Lord followed them. And the armed men went before the priests that blew with the trumpets, and the rearward came after the ark, and the priests going on and blowing with the trumpets. And Joshua had commanded the people, saying, ye shall not shout, nor make any noise with your voice, neither shall any word proceed out of your mouth, until the day that I bid you shout. Then ye shall shout. So the ark of the Lord compassed the city, going about at once, and they came into the camp, lodged in the camp. Joshua rose early in the morning. The priests took up the ark of the Lord, and 7 priests bearing 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord went on continually and blew with the trumpets. Now, so what I want us to understand is that, and I didn't realize this before I studied this, that I always thought that no one said anything for 7 days, and there was no sound. But evidently, when they marched around the city, the priests were blowing the trumpets continuously as they marched around the whole time, and they went back home. Now, what verse was I in? 14? Okay. And it came to pass, the second day they compassed the city once and returned to the camp, so they did 6 days. And it came to pass on the seventh day that they rose early about the dawning of the day and compassed the city about after the same manner 7 times. Only on that day they compassed the city 7 times. It came to pass on the 7th time, when the priests blew the trumpets, Joshua said unto the people, Shout, for the Lord hath given you the city. And the city shall be accursed, even it, and all that are therein, to the Lord. Only Rahab the harlot shall live, she and all that are with her in the house, because she hid the messengers that we sent. All right. So this account dealing with trumpets, once again, just shows us that specifically God used trumpets in this particular miraculous event to basically signal the destruction. It signaled the destruction of the wicked and the victory of God's people. Now, keep that in mind, because as we get into the New Testament, we're going to see some similarities there. When the trumpet sounds, in some instances in the New Testament, it's a declaration of wickedness being judged, and also victory for God and God's people. Now, I want to go back to Leviticus 23. And we'll notice the feast that God had set up for Israel to observe, the feast of the Lord. And Leviticus 23 lists all of these 7 feasts. They're yearly feasts that God had them establish. And in verse number 5, obviously, is the Passover. Then you've got the Feast of Unleavened Bread. In verse 9, you got the Feast of the First Fruits. And then in verse number 15, you have the Feast of Pentecost. So Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits, and Pentecost. Now, I kind of mentioned this in passing. I think it might have been Sunday morning in Sunday school. But the 7 feasts that are listed in this chapter, there's 7 in chapter 23. The first 4 were fulfilled by Christ during the crucifixion time. Okay? So that's a very interesting thing to consider. They're all spring feast. So we understand, we celebrate Easter, the time around the crucifixion and the resurrection. Well, all of that, these first 4 are all around that time frame. And then you have summer, which goes, from springtime. You've got your planting and your harvesting. And then you have your fall festivals. And if you look on your calendar on your phone or at home on a calendar, you'll notice, like in September of this year, there'll be Rosh Hashanah, and then Yom Kippur, and then I forgot the last one, Sukkot, S-U-K-K-O-T. I don't know how to say that, but I think it's Sukkot. So those 3 feasts are the 3 fall feasts, and they all happen this year in September. And so we notice now in verse 23 of Leviticus 23, the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, In the 7th month, in the first day of the month, shall ye have a Sabbath, a memorial of blowing of trumpets and holy convocation, and ye shall do no servile work therein, but ye shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord. Now, this lesson isn't designed to go into detail about each of these feasts. We may do that sometime, and there's a lot more to this the Feast of Trumpets, than what I'm going to speak about tonight. But I wanted us to understand something regarding the Feast of Trumpets, because these, like I said, these last three fall feasts, according to students of these feasts, and I've done a little bit of research on it, and it's kind of an interesting study. These 3 fall feasts are kind of hanging out there, so to speak, and so there's a lot to cover with that. But I want to notice the timeline on this. In verse number 24, it says, "In the 7th month, on the first day of the month." So in today's calendar, that would be Rosh Hashanah, 7th month, first day. And that's in September of this year. This feast begins the days of awe. Okay, and so for 10 days after the feast when the trumpet sounds, this is the way it worked in the Old Testament. The trumpet would sound in the fall, and that would be the feast. So that would start the fall festival time. And then you had 10 days of awe or 10 days of affliction where people would afflict themselves. That doesn't mean physically. You know, they didn't go around, you know, cutting themselves and all that kind of stuff. In other words, there were 10 days of serious reflection on their life and their sin and their relationship with God, because in 10 days was the Day of Atonement. Well, what was that? Well, Day of Atonement was when the high priest went into the Holy of Holies once a year and would sprinkle blood on the mercy seat, you see. And that was a picture of what Christ was going to do in the New Testament. All of this points to Christ. What Christ would do in the New Testament when he shed his blood, and that would actually cleanse the world of their sins, not the blood that these priests were spreading upon the mercy seat in the tabernacle. But it was a picture of this. So you had the Feast of Trumpets, that trumpet blew, and that started it. And then your 10 days of awe, then you got Day of Atonement. And then after that was Sukkot, or that's the I think they call it the Feast of Tabernacles, and that's a joyous time where in the New Testament it's really the idea that the Lord dwells with his people, he tabernacles with his people, and it speaks of that in Revelation. Now, with that in mind, Jesus speaks in the New Testament about this. Go to Matthew 24. And he speaks of a trumpet sounding when the Son of Man appears. So in Matthew 24, we'll start in verse 27 and read down through 31. And you'll notice the trumpet is mentioned here. So verse 27 of Matthew 24, for as the lightning cometh out of the east and shineth even unto the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For wheresoever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together. Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from the one end of heaven to the other. All right, so in this particular passage, Jesus refers to the coming of the Son of Man, the second coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory, and the trumpet sounds. Okay, so the reason I'm trying to tie this together, Old and New Testament, is because I think it helps us better understand some things in the New Testament about trumpet sounding, and about things maybe that's even yet to come in relationship to the Old Testament purpose of trumpets. Because God doesn't do anything for no reason at all. There's a reason for these trumpets. Now, we want to look at 1 Corinthians 15, and then we'll go to Revelation. That's a familiar passage to you. In 1 Corinthians 15, we'll look at verse 51 and 52. Now, we studied Sunday morning about Paul's mysteries, and he was famous for teaching about mysteries. And he says in verse 51 of 1 Corinthians 15, behold, I show you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, where? At the last trump. So notice there's a significance here. Now, if you think about the purpose for trumpets in the Old Testament, I mean, logically speaking, the purpose of a trumpet was to sound an alarm, and it was also to bring people together. And it was to, like, for instance, if they blew one trumpet in Israel's day, only the princes would show up, the leaders of the tribes. They would have a meeting. If they blew with two, then the whole congregation was to appear. It was a gathering. Okay. And so we notice in verse 52, in the moment of twinkling of an eye, at the last trump, for the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. So, I mean, this trumpet, I guess we could call it theology, trumpet theology. We'll make a new ology tonight, okay? Trumpetology, perfect. I can read lips. Trumpetology, right? Just come up with a great term. All right, so now we have trumpetology that we're studying, and we see the Old and New Testament ties this together, really. Now, lastly, let's go to Revelation chapter 8. Because in Revelations, we see what's called the trumpet judgments. And they're quite interesting. But beginning in verse, you've got the seventh seal being open. And in this seventh seal is 7 trumpets. And so the first trumpet is mentioned in verse number 7. Go to Revelation 8, verse 7. The first angel sounded the trumpet, and there followed hail and fire mingled with blood, and they were cast upon the earth, and the third part of the trees were burnt up, and the grass was burnt up. All right? It goes right along consecutively here. The second trumpet sounds in verse 8, and it was almost dead. I'll get this other one here. All right, in verse number 8 it says, and the second angel sounded, and it was as it were a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea. And the third part of the sea became blood. And the third part of the creatures which were in the sea had life and died. And the third part of the ships were destroyed. All right, so the third one goes right into verse 10. The third trumpet, a third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, and it fell upon the third part of the rivers, upon the fountains of waters. And the name of the star is called Wormwood. And the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died in the waters because they were made bitter. Now, you might want to do a personal study on what wormwood means in the Bible, because there's some interesting things there. And then the fourth trumpet is in verse number 12. The fourth angel sounded, and the third part of the sun was smitten, and the third part of the moon, third part of the stars. So as the third part of them was darkened, and the day shone not for a third part of it, and the night likewise. All right, and now we see the fifth angel is sounded in verse chapter 9, the fifth trumpet. And it says, the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him was given the key to the bottomless pit. And he opened the bottomless pit, and there arose a smoke out of the pit, and as the smoke of a great furnace. And the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit. And there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth, and upon them was given power, as the scorpions of the earth have power. Now we'll jump down to verse 11, and it says, and they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue hath his name Apollyon. All right? Okay, so that's all encompassed there in the fifth trumpet. Really, that whole chapter, to a large degree, is dealing with this fifth trumpet. The sixth trumpet sounds in chapter 9, verse 14, saying to the sixth angel which had the trumpet, loose the 4 angels which are bound in the great river of Euphrates. And then you can read the rest of that chapter for what takes place on the sixth trumpet. And the seventh trumpet is found in chapter 11. So you jump over in chapter 10, we have kind of a pause, in a sense, between the sixth and seventh trumpet, and you have this little book that John is invited to eat there, and the angel there in verse number 1, the angel clothed with a cloud and a rainbow upon his head. All right, all that's listed in chapter 10, and then chapter 11, we'll jump down to verse 15. Chapter 11 and verse 15, we'll read through 19. So this is the seventh trumpet sounding. And it says, and there were great voices in heaven saying, the kingdoms, now notice this, the kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of our Lord and of his Christ. And he shall reign forever and ever. And the 24 elders which sat before God on their seats fell upon their faces and worshiped God, saying, we give thee thanks, O Lord God Almighty, which art and wast and art to come, because thou hast taken to thee, notice this, thou hast taken to thee thy great power and hast reigned. Now what do we see in here? I want to stop just for a minute. So I want us to grasp what takes place in this seventh trumpet sounding. This is the last trumpet here, is that the kingdoms of the world become the kingdoms of Christ forever. Okay? This is an important part of the study, because we go all the way back to Numbers 10 when trumpets basically are mentioned in the life of Israel. And we saw what they were for. And then we get to this last trumpet sounding in Revelation 11. And did you notice there in verse number 15 the significance of this? The kingdoms of the world are become the kingdoms of our Lord and his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever. Now notice in verse number 18 and 19. And the nations were angry, and thy wrath is come, and the time of the dead, that they should be judged, and that thou shouldest give reward unto thy servants the prophets, and to the saints, and them that fear thy name, small and great, and shouldest destroy them which destroy the earth. The wicked will be destroyed. And the temple of God was open in heaven. Now this is the last mention of the temple in the Bible. The temple of God was open in heaven, or the Ark of the Covenant. And there was seen in his temple the Ark of his testament, and there were lightnings and voices and thunderings and an earthquake and great hail. Now that ties right back in with Mount Sinai, what we read there. So there's just so much with this trumpetology that Rai has described for us. Did you guys go into this much detail yet? You got a... Okay. There's a lot in here, really. Oh, you did. Deep diving through the Greek on trumpets. I bet that's an interesting study. So we're going to end the lesson with this tonight for our study on trumpets tonight. I know it's more of a topical lesson, but as we kind of quickly scan Scripture, there's quite a lot to learn, and sometimes by doing that, we can piece together a better understanding of even today, what the area time frame we're living in today. All right. So any comments?